My name is Rowan Hale, and the night I stopped believing in the comfort of nothing there began with a sound I had heard 1,000 times before, but never truly listened to. A low, broken bark tearing itself out of my dog's chest at exactly 2:17 a.m. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't playful, it was deliberate, paced, as if each bark were a warning being carefully chosen. I lay still at first, staring at the ceiling, already knowing which corner he was facing without needing to look. The kitchen, the place where the refrigerator light never quite reached. The place I had always avoided standing in barefoot, though I never admitted why. I told myself, as I always had, that it was drafts, old plumbing, the way houses talk to themselves when the world quiets down. That explanation had served me well for years. It had allowed me to sleep, to practice, to pretend control was something you could keep forever once you learned the right words. But that night, my dog didn't stop. His nails scraped softly against the floor as he leaned forward, every muscle locked, eyes fixed on the same unmoving patch of wall, like he was tracking breath instead of shape. The air felt heavier the longer I listened, not colder, heavier, like humidity before a storm that never quite breaks. I noticed my own breathing slow, not from calm, but from instinct, the same instinct I used to rely on when reading rooms instead of cards, silences instead of flames. I realized then that the barking wasn't the most unsettling part. It was the pause between each sound, the way he waited, as if something on the other side of that corner was responding in intervals I couldn't hear. I swung my legs out of bed and immediately regretted it. The floor felt wrong under my feet, not temperature-wise, but emotionally, the way certain places feel saturated with moments you didn't live but somehow remember. Each step toward the kitchen made my chest tighten, and with it came the old reflex to name, to label, to protect myself with explanation. I hadn't used that reflex in years. I had buried it under normalcy, under morning routines and polite conversations, under the lie that leaving a practice means leaving the knowing behind. My dog didn't look at me when I reached him. He didn't need reassurance. He needed witness. His body trembled, not with fear, but with restraint, like something in him wanted to lunge or flee and was choosing neither. I followed his line of sight and felt it then. Not a presence, not a figure, but a pressure, as if the corner itself were swollen with something unsaid. The walls met there at a slightly imperfect angle, a builder's mistake from decades ago, and suddenly that floor felt intentional, like a mouth left barely open. I became aware of how quiet the rest of the house was, how even the hum of electricity seemed to pull back. My thoughts tried to scatter, but my attention wouldn't let them. I knew, in that suspended moment, that this wasn't about fear or imagination or superstition. It was about accumulation, about what gathers when no one looks too closely for too long. My dog barked again, sharper this time, and I understood with a clarity that made my stomach drop. He wasn't reacting to an intruder, he was reacting to a memory that had learned how to stand upright. The lie of nothing there is one we inherit early, the same way we inherit bedtime stories and the idea that silence means safety. I used to repeat it without thinking, the way you repeat a prayer you no longer believe in, but still know by heart. Nothing there. Just a shadow, just a sound, just your dog being dramatic. I said it to friends, to clients, back when I still worked in that world, and eventually to myself. It's an easy lie because it asks nothing of you. It doesn't require attention, responsibility, or discomfort. It allows you to walk past a barking dog and keep your eyes forward, to sleep through warnings dressed up as noise. But dogs don't bark at nothing. They don't have the luxury of abstraction. They respond to stimulus, to pressure changes in a room, to emotional density, the way we respond to heat or pain. When a dog barks at an empty corner, what he's reacting to isn't absence, it's excess. Too much of something layered into a space that was never meant to hold it. People assume danger must look like teeth or claws, something that lunges. Animals know better. They understand that the quietest threats are the ones that don't move at all. When I was still practicing, I learned how often humans confuse familiarity with safety. A room you've lived in for years feels harmless because it hasn't hurt you yet. But spaces accumulate. They absorb arguments thrown into the air, grief swallowed instead of spoken, fear paced into the floorboards at 3 in the morning. We leave pieces of ourselves behind without realizing it, and over time, those pieces begin to overlap. Corners are especially good at holding them. Walls meet and stop moving there. Energy stalls. Dogs feel that stagnation like a bad smell they can't escape. The lie persists because admitting otherwise would mean admitting that your home remembers you, that it listens, that it reacts. People don't want that kind of intimacy with their own lives. It's easier to blame imagination than to accept that your dog may be responding to the residue of who you were on your worst nights. When someone laughs and says he's barking at ghosts, what they really mean is, I don't want to look at what's been left behind. I used to teach others how to sense these things without flinching, how to notice when a room felt thick or sharp or restless, and yet, like everyone else, I still relied on the lie when it suited me. I told myself my dog was overreacting because acknowledging the alternative would mean acknowledging my own role in what had collected there. Dogs don't create these disturbances, they announce them. They act as early warning systems in houses that have learned how to hold their breath. That night in the kitchen, the lie unraveled slowly, not in panic, but in recognition. Watching my dog hold his ground, I realized how long I had benefited from pretending that awareness was optional, that seeing was something you could turn off permanently. The truth pressed in around that corner, patient and unmoving, and for the first time in years I understood that nothing there was never a description. It was a defense. Corners remember because they are taught to. Every structure trains them that way. Two walls meet and movement stops, sound bends, air slows just enough to linger. Humans think memory lives in minds and bodies, but spaces have their own method of keeping score. When something intense happens in a room, the energy doesn't disperse evenly. It drifts until it finds resistance, and corners provide it. They are the pauses in architecture, the places where motion gives up. Over time, they become archives no one intended to build. I learned this long before I admitted it to myself. Back when I still worked with intention and ritual, corners were never neutral. They were watched, marked, avoided, or used deliberately. You never stood in one during emotional work unless you wanted the feeling to stay. Corners amplify repetition. A single argument won't do much, but the same grief returned to night after night will sink in like water into untreated wood. Dogs notice because their bodies are tuned for patterns. They feel when a place has been rehearsed too many times. What most people don't understand is that corners don't just hold events, they hold reactions. The fear you didn't voice, the anger you swallowed, the wish you thought but didn't finish. Those moments don't disappear just because you moved on. They compress, they wait, and eventually they develop a kind of presence that isn't alive but isn't passive either. It's the difference between an empty room and one where someone just left. Dogs can tell when the leaving never quite finished. I've watched dogs refuse to eat near certain corners, drag their beds away from them, growl softly without ever showing teeth. That behavior isn't random. It's a response to pressure that doesn't belong to the present moment. Corners become crowded with time, and animals are far more sensitive to time distortion than we are. Where we feel a vague unease, they feel intrusion. Where we rationalize, they brace. There's also something about height. Corners rise from floor to ceiling uninterrupted, giving whatever settles there a vertical reach. That's why dogs often look upward when they bark, tracking something you assume is above their line of sight. It's not that something is standing there, it's that the corner itself feels tall, expanded, more than it should be. Dogs react to imbalance the way we react to a sudden tilt in the ground beneath us. I used to cleanse corners obsessively, not with fear, but with respect. They were treated like old witnesses, not enemies. Because when you ignore them, they don't empty themselves. They thicken, and when enough emotional residue stacks in one place, it starts to behave less like memory and more like atmosphere. Something you can walk into without meaning to, something that brushes back. That's why your dog doesn't bark in the middle of the room. Open space breathes. Corners hold their breath forever, and once you understand that, it becomes harder to dismiss what an animal is telling you when it refuses to look away from one. What stirs after dark isn't born at night, it's revealed by it. Daytime keeps everything distracted, light scatters attention, noise blurs edges, and movement reassures us that the world is stable. At night, all of that falls away. The house settles into itself. The walls cool. The air thickens just enough for things to become noticeable again. Dogs don't suddenly become sensitive when the sun goes down. They simply lose the interference that keeps them quiet during the day. Darkness doesn't create disturbances, it unmasks them. After midnight, spaces behave differently. You can feel it even if you've never had words for it. The way a familiar room feels larger, deeper, less anchored. Emotional residue loosens its grip on the past and begins to replay itself, not as images or voices, but as pressure and movement. It's like a memory stretching its legs after being folded too long. Dogs react to that shift immediately. Their bodies know when something has changed in the atmosphere, when the room has gone from still to expectant. Night also lowers resistance. Humans are tired then mentally and emotionally. We're less defended, less noisy inside our own heads. That vulnerability opens space for old imprints to surface. Corners that felt quiet all day begin to pulse faintly, not with sound, but with sensation. Dogs track that sensation the way they track storms before clouds arrive. They bark not because they're startled, but because they're alerting. Something is active again. There's a rhythm to it. If you pay attention, you'll notice your dog often barks at the same time each night. That isn't coincidence. Emotional echoes follow patterns, especially those formed during repeated late-night moments. Arguments that always happened after dinner. Grief that only surfaced once the house was asleep. Fear that crept in when no one was watching. Those emotions train the space to respond on a schedule. Dogs remember that schedule even if you don't. People ask whether it's spirits, whether something is visiting after dark. That question misses the point. What stirs isn't an outsider, it's local. It belongs to the house, to the history lived inside it. Night doesn't invite strangers in, it lets residents move around. Dogs aren't witnessing an invasion, they're witnessing circulation. Old energy shifting positions, replaying itself because it was never resolved enough to dissolve. I used to feel this most clearly when I woke suddenly without knowing why. That quiet moment before thought returned, when the room felt occupied without anyone being there. My dog would already be awake, staring, listening to something internal to the space itself. His bark would break the tension, almost like a release valve. Sound disrupts stagnation. Barking pushes back against build-up. That's why dogs don't always sound afraid when they bark at night. Sometimes there's frustration in it, sometimes insistence. They're reacting to something that refuses to finish happening. Darkness gives that unfinished thing room to move, and dogs, unwilling to ignore it, become the only ones willing to respond. The mistake I made was thinking I could control what I didn't understand. I had always believed that knowledge gave me power, that awareness allowed me to command rather than coexist. So when my dog started barking at that corner with the insistence of someone delivering a warning I couldn't yet translate, I did what any rational human would do. I told him to stop. I snapped my fingers, raised my voice, called his name, all the while convinced that discipline would override instinct. It didn't. He didn't flinch, didn't look at me for reassurance. He only barked harder, his body rigid, his eyes sharp, tracing the invisible shape of something I refused to see. I followed his gaze, bracing myself for the ordinary, a shadow cast by the refrigerator, a stray reflection from the streetlight, but there was nothing I could name, nothing that my rational mind could pin down, and yet I felt it, that familiar weight pressing against my chest, the subtle chill along my spine, the sense of being observed by an intelligence that didn't need a body. For a moment I froze, realizing that all the years I had spent learning spells, reading signs, and sensing energy had not prepared me for this, a warning I could neither dismiss nor fully comprehend, delivered not through the language of magic, but through instinct. I tried again to assert control. I grabbed his collar, pulled him gently toward the middle of the room, and whispered reassurances that I didn't believe. My hands shook because I could feel the corner pulsing, a quiet insistence that demanded acknowledgement. The room wasn't dangerous in the conventional sense. It was something else entirely, something persistent, something alive in a way I had learned to sense, but had long stopped respecting. The mistake wasn't just scolding my dog, it was thinking my presence, my will, could make the energy obey. He barked once more, low and resonant, and I realized he wasn't reacting to a presence outside the realm of the physical. He was reacting to what the space itself remembered. Corners remember what humans forget, and dogs remember corners. He was reading a map I couldn't see, feeling threads of tension that had woven themselves into the structure of the house over decades. My insistence that he stop barking was my refusal to acknowledge those threads, my attempt to ignore history in favor of convenience. The night stretched long, and the mistake became clearer with each passing hour. My dog didn't calm down because I demanded it. He calmed only when I stepped back, breathed, and allowed myself to become a witness rather than a master. I put my hand on his back and let my attention settle, not on the barking itself, but on what it was trying to tell me. Slowly, the corner's pressure softened, not because I had banished it, but because I had recognized it. My failure had been simple and human. I had assumed that ignorance could protect me, that dismissal could substitute for awareness. In reality, it was respect that was required, attention that was overdue, and humility that I had yet to learn. It was that night, kneeling beside my dog, feeling the weight of something unseen but insistent, that I understood the true error I had been making all along. The belief that I could separate myself from the unseen currents flowing through a space I thought I owned. I couldn't command them, I could only notice them. What you should do instead is something almost no one expects, nothing at first. Not nothing in the sense of ignoring, but nothing in the sense of forcing, scolding, or pretending the barking is an inconvenience. The first step is to sit quietly near your dog and let him hold his ground. Put a hand on his back if he allows it and breathe with him. Match your rhythm to his, not to the clock or the expectation that silence must return. Dogs aren't just barking at noise, they're broadcasting concern. Your attention validates that concern. Without acknowledgement, the pressure in the corner grows thicker, like fog trapped inside walls. Speak softly if you feel compelled to speak at all. Words aren't magic here, they're intention. A calm tone reassures, not because it changes the unseen currents, but because it signals to your dog that he is not alone in facing them. Do not laugh, do not question, do not brand the behavior as irrational. Your dog knows more about that space than you do in the moment. He is guiding you, and the wrong response, mockery, fear, frustration, only stiffens the tension. Let your presence be steady. Let your breathing be steady. Let your acceptance be steady. Movement is delicate but important. You do not need to sweep, reorganize, or chase energy with rituals or symbols, unless that is something you are trained and comfortable doing. Simple adjustments are enough. Open a window, allow air to circulate. The house breathes differently when corners are seen and acknowledged. That circulation softens the hold of whatever is folded into the angles, but it does so subtly. Be patient. What your dog senses is persistent. It won't vanish in an instant. Pay attention to timing. Dogs often bark at the same corner at the same hour because the energy they are reacting to has a rhythm. Notice when he alerts you. Take mental notes. Patterns matter. There is meaning in repetition. Your dog is acting as an early warning system, not against danger in the conventional sense, but against buildup of pressure that could affect the household in ways you cannot see or feel yet. Responding promptly, even in small ways, prevents escalation. Finally, accept humility. Your dog's instinct exceeds your understanding in these moments, and that is okay. You are not failing him by stepping back and observing. You are learning the first lesson I learned the hard way. Control is less useful than attention, force less effective than acknowledgement, and fear less productive than respect. Your dog is patient, loyal, and perceptive. Treat him as a partner, not a nuisance. Sit with him. Watch with him, feel with him, and in doing so, you will find that the house, the corners, and your dog begin to move toward a quiet that comes not from denial, but from being fully seen. I walked away from witchcraft, not because I stopped believing in the unseen, but because I realized some knowledge demands more than a mind can bear. It demands the courage to face truths that have no shape, no name, and no guarantee of comfort. The knowledge of corners that remember, of energy that lingers long after we think it has gone, of your dog who watches and warns with patience, you will never fully understand. This is not the kind of knowledge that offers mastery. It offers witness. And witness is heavy. It changes the way you move, the way you breathe, the way you think about the spaces you occupy. Every night, when your dog stiffens and barks at that empty corner, he is speaking in a language that does not rely on sight or sound as humans understand them. He speaks in pressure, in tension, in the vibration of memories folded into walls and floorboards. And you may think it is nothing, that it is absurd, that you are imagining meaning where there is none. But if you have ever paused to watch him, felt the taut line of his body, heard the persistence in his voice, then you know that there is meaning there, whether or not your human mind can name it. What he sees is not the past nor the present alone. It is the overlap of both, folded into angles, breathing with life that refuses to leave quietly. I have felt it, the weight of that attention, the insistence of corners that will not let go. I have felt the pressure press against my chest, watched shadows stretch beyond reason, and known that turning away will never erase what has been stored, only let it fester in silence. The mistake is always the same. Believing that ignorance can shield you, that dismissal can protect you, that walls are neutral. They are not. Corners are witnesses. Walls remember. And your dog is the messenger, the only one willing to carry the burden for you. Some nights I would sit with him, hand on fur, and simply breathe. I would allow the weight of the house to press down without flinching, without trying to chase it away, and I began to understand what it truly means to coexist with the unseen. To coexist is not to conquer, not to banish, not to manipulate. It is to acknowledge, to respect, to honor. It is to recognize that the world is never as empty as it appears, and that loyalty and instinct often see far more clearly than intellect or will. In those moments when the barking would finally taper and the corners would seem to relax just a fraction, I realized that the true power does not lie in altering what is, but in choosing how to respond to what is revealed. Your dog is waiting for you to decide. Every growl, every bark, every rigid stare is an offering, a challenge, a revelation. He demands presence, not denial, understanding, not dismissal. He asks you to confront the truth of your home, the weight of your past, the currents of energy you have walked through without notice. And when you finally look, when you finally feel the insistence of what has been hidden in plain sight, you are forced to answer, not in words, not in ritual, not in theory, but in the raw, lived engagement with reality that most people avoid until it cannot be ignored. The question then is no longer about what barks or why. It is about what you will do with the knowledge he offers, about how you will respond when the unseen presses against your chest and waits for acknowledgement. Will you turn away? Will you dismiss it? Will you stand steady and meet the weight of it, hand on your dog's back, eyes fixed on the corner, heart open to truths you cannot fully name? The house will wait, the corners will wait, and your dog, patient and resolute, will wait to see whether you are ready to see what he has been trying to show you all along.